Hey guys, it's Azka, trying something new for this video today. I've actually written a script of everything I want to say instead of just winging it and going unscripted. Let me know what you guys think, and maybe next year when the next Azka video comes out, I'll take your ideas to mind. Anyway, here's what we're doing today. I've gone all the way to page 7 of Google and gotten all these different top 25 and top 10 lists of each video game that's on the Game Boy Advance. I don't know why I chose the Game Boy Advance, but that's what we're doing. So, here's how it works. If you placed in 25th place on that list, you got 1 point. If you placed in first place on that list, you got 25 points. The more points you have, the better of a game you are, the higher you place on the list. So this is the top 50 Game Boy Advance games. And now that you know the rules, let's get right into it with number 50. Number 50 is Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. Now, this is actually the first Kirby game that I can ever remember seeing advertisements for in my childhood, and it was also the first one I ever played. I think most people will agree that the sprite work on the Game Boy Advance and DS games are probably the best the series has ever seen. They just look really good and, I don't know, cute and crisp. I should mention I also adore the menu design in these games and the menu music as well. Even though it's just a remake of an old title, I think this game adds enough new stuff like sub-games and the first time Meta Knight was playable, that this game is definitely worth your time. Even if you're not a Kirby fan, I think it's actually a nice introduction to the series if you've never played one before. Moving on to number 49, we have Tactics Ogre, The Knight of Lotus. Now, I haven't played this game, and I'm probably not going to take the 30 hours it takes to beat it to do a 30-second review, but from what I understand, it's similar to Final Fantasy Tactics and is generally well received. In fact, it looks exactly like Final Fantasy Tactics. I do need to get around to playing it someday, but probably not for this video. Up next is number 48, which is Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls. It's a remake of the original 2 Final Fantasy games that were ported to the Game Boy Advance. Obviously, they've received major graphical overhauls since the NES, but there's also more that they've added. The games are pretty much one-to-one recreations of their counterparts, with the addition of a bestiary so you can look at the monsters that you've slain, and the ability to save anywhere you want in case your battery's running low. It's a good package, and while I still wouldn't recommend Final Fantasy II to anybody who likes good games or having fun, if you absolutely have to play it, then I would say go for this version. Number 47 is Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Now this one is weird. I don't know what a Prince of Persia Game Boy Advance game is doing, and I didn't even know that it existed until I started looking at these lists. But it showed up actually a handful of times and I was a little interested. Usually when a console game gets a Game Boy Advance adaptation, that adaptation is, well, not that great. And yes, I would probably rather play the actual Prince of Persia than this version of it, but the controls are actually surprisingly smooth. The basic gist of this game is that you have to travel from room to room, completing various challenges. It's pretty simple and a watered-down version of what exists on the PlayStation 2, but it's still pretty nifty, and you might check it out if you like Prince of Persia. Number 46 is Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. Now, every single Castlevania game that was on Game Boy Advance is on this list somewhere, but Harmony of Dissonance comes out the lowest. Many people discredit this game since it's quite short, and just Belmont isn't the most exciting Belmont or character at all. A lot of people don't care for the soundtrack, and I can understand that. It grates on the ears from time to time. However, I still think this game has a lot going for it, since it combines the Metroidvania elements of the newer Vanias and the classic combat system of the whip from the older Castlevanias. Circle of the Moon does that too, and it's got better music, and it's more highly rated, but regardless, this isn't a bad Castlevania game. Certainly somewhere in the middle of the pack, though. And up next is Contra Advance. I don't really have a lot to say about this game. It's a port of Contra 3 to the Game Boy Advance, and it's hard. I've never been too good at Contra, and this one is especially hard since it's on such a small screen, and bullets and enemies just come out of nowhere. It's hard to kind of see where you are. The footage you're seeing right now is me not being able to make it past level 1. I think the original Super Nintendo version of this game is really what you would want to play, but for Contra in your pocket, I'm sure it's a nice option. And then number 44 is Final Fantasy IV Advance. This game was only mentioned once, but the one mention it did get from Arcade Sushi put it as their number 1. This port of Final Fantasy IV was the first Final Fantasy game I had ever played, and perhaps that's why I hold it in such high regard. Maybe it's just some nostalgia goggles for me. It isn't my favorite of the series at all, but it's up there. Final Fantasy IV has had so many different remakes and ports that it's hard to say which one is the definitive best version, but I would probably say that the Nintendo DS is a good bet, and since the Advance and the DS are both portable, there's really no reason to play this version of the game anymore. That being said, I still think this game deserves its praise for bringing one of the best Final Fantasies to portability for the first time, and introducing many people, like myself, to the series as a whole. Up next is number 43, Sonic Advance. So, you see these game sprites everywhere you turn. They're everywhere online, Ultimate Flash Sonic and things like that. I never actually owned this game myself when I was younger, but somehow everybody else did, so I definitely got my fair share of it. And I always picked Amy because she's cute and I'm a closet furry. What this game excels most at is, 1, capturing that feeling of 2D Sonic without solely relying on old assets and design tropes from those old games like Sonic Mania, which is still a good game, but it also designs each level so that no matter who you select, be it Sonic, Knuckles, Tails, or Amy, you can find a path that highlights each character's strengths. This was Sonic Mania before Sonic Mania was a thing. It's a pretty good game. 42, Fire Emblem, The Sacred Stones. Now, I have very fond memories of this one. It was my introduction to the series at a young age, and to this day, still just might be my favorite. Lots of people will denounce this one for being too easy, and I'll admit it is surely the easiest of the Game Boy Advance titles, but probably not the easiest in the whole series. Playing through this game as a child, I didn't care much for the story and mostly just mashed A to get through everything so I could get to fighting the spooky zombies and spiders, and that's what I love most about this game, is all the monsters you fight. Fire Emblem needs more of that. More monsters, less Manicheets. Up next is Rhydian 2. Now, I'd never heard of this one, and I'd never played this one. So, I just want to point out right off the bat that you can change instruments on the main menu to get different soundtracks, and that is absolutely amazing. It's only a shame, though, that it's only on the main menu that this feature exists and doesn't affect any of the actual music in the levels of the game itself. The whole game has this pseudo 3D effect that you see on a couple different Game Boy Advance titles, and it actually looks kind of nice here. It's a vertical shoot 'em up, so the gameplay isn't breaking new ground or anything, but it's good, simple fun. Definitely give this a shot if you're into these types of games. Moving right along to number 40, gotta keep these reviews short and sweet, is Ninja 5-0. Here's another one that I'd never heard of, and it appeared on at least like 6 different lists, usually ranking in the low to mid range, so I was interested to check this one out since a lot of people seem to like it. The game is just as the title says, you're a ninja police, and I had a lot of fun with it actually. The basic idea is that you need to get the red key to open the red door and leave the level, but there's also hostages and other valuables thrown in that you should grab first for extra points. There's this interesting swinging mechanic that works really fluidly for being on the Game Boy Advance, and I was really impressed by how smooth it was to play and how it felt. I'll probably go back to this one after the whole thing is done just to finish it for fun. At number 39 is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team, a counterpart to the Blue Rescue Team on the Nintendo DS, and I don't know what it is, but I cannot get into these games. I've tried on several different occasions to get into any Mystery Dungeon game, not limited to the Pokemon series, and I just can't do it. The algorithmic dungeon generation is so bland, and the combat is the most boring thing in the world for me. It's unfortunate because I always hear how great these stories in these games are, at least before the 3DS titles. The biggest thing I can give these games, though, is the personality quiz to determine which Pokemon you are at the beginning of the game. I've always really liked that. Number 38. Now, this is one I have played once, long time ago, so it's hard for me to remember all the details, but this is an action RPG, and it's kind of like the Tales games, the earlier ones before they came onto GameCube and all that. I don't recall the story being all that intense, but I was in middle school at the time, so it might actually be a masterpiece. I don't know. I really enjoy the art style of this game. It's very cute and has that early 2000s manga look. The combat isn't very complex, but as you progress, you'll eventually get more summons and things that can mix up the monotony a bit. I wouldn't say it's one of the best RPGs ever, but it's a pretty nice time. And next is FZero Maximum Velocity. Man, do I suck at FZero. And that's what this is. It's just the Super Nintendo FZero game, but it's on a handheld. Yeah, the courses are different, but the gameplay is identical. Run into walls, try your best to drift, fail, charge up in the repair stations, get back into the race, and then get kicked out when you come in last. I wouldn't think they'd try to put FZero on handhelds, but here it is. It's not bad, but I'm not good at it, and I don't think racing games are really this system's strong suit, so I can't really recommend it. Number 36 is Pinball of the Dead. Now, there's a lot to process here. 1, there's a House of the Dead pinball spin-off game. 2, there's like 10 pinball games on the Game Boy Advance for some reason. 3, Pinball of the Dead is better than 14 of the other games on this list. I mean, it only showed up like 1 or 2 times, but when it did, it scored fairly high, so is it good? I suppose it's not bad, but I can't see this being any more enjoyment than any of the other pinball games on the system. The graphics are really rough. I'm sure they look fine on the tiny GBA screen. There's no real objective other than to rack up points and kill bosses. This game has bosses? You know what other pinball game has bosses? Mario Pinball, and that game sucks. Well, this one's okay though. Number 35 is Mario Tennis Power Tour, and holy shit. I had always known that these games had a story or campaign mode that was kind of like an RPG, but kinda not. But I was not expecting this. This game's art style is incredibly charming and makes me want to see it all the way to the end. Why did I wait until now to play this? The story sees you climbing the ranks of a tennis academy and facing off against different teams to earn glory at the top of the class and eventually attend the worldwide tournament. There aren't even any Mario characters involved. Maybe they show up later, but I didn't see any in my time with it. Rest assured, they are still here though. All your favorites, Mario, Luigi, Donkey Kong, and Waluigi, but no Wario? I don't understand. This game really surprised me, and I want to keep playing it, but unfortunately we've got other games to get to, like the next on our list, Super Mario Advance, otherwise just Super Mario Bros. 2. It's the first of many, many Super Mario Advance series that ports classic Mario hits to the Game Boy Advance with some tweaks and additions. Though I believe the changes to Super Mario Bros. 2 are the most apparent. First off, the characters never shut up, they just keep making noises. And then there's Birdo. Ugh. I think they wanted to make this more accessible to all players because, let's be honest, Super Mario Bros. 2 is kinda hard as balls. To remedy this, they made enemies drop a bunch of hearts when they're killed, and it helps ease the pain of getting hit all the time. Also, I think the character select screen is really polished and looks really nice. Despite all this, I would still just play the original or the All-Stars version because this one is just too easy and it's way too noisy. Up next is Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. Now try not to say too much about this one. At the time, playing Kingdom Hearts on the go was amazing. However, when you compare it to everything else the series has to offer now, this one falls super short. It's still a fine game, but it's definitely the lowest point in the series in my opinion. The card mechanic is an interesting concept, but it still needs a lot of work. The story is vital to follow though, so if you care about the lore, you'll have to go through it, but thankfully, it got a remake on the PlayStation 2 that doesn't fix all of the problems, but it looks, sounds, and plays way better than this. So if you're gonna play it, do that one instead. Number 32, Mega Man Battle Network 2. Now, I've always heard great things about this series, though I had no idea when I was looking them up that there were actually 6 of them and they were all on the Game Boy Advance. I got my first taste trying these after this video, and I can see the potential that this has and why so many people love it. I wanted to keep playing even after just 16 minutes of getting footage. The combat is super unique and very interesting. I had always thought that it was turn-based, and while it sort of is with the chip placing, it's far more fast-paced than I thought. Now, I don't know what makes 2 so much better than the others, since this is the only one I ever played. I'll have to go back to this one on my own time eventually and check it out though. Number 31, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Now, some people would argue that Nightmare and Dreamland is the better game, but those people are wrong. This is definitely one of the best Kirby games ever made because of how different it is. HAL Labs threw out the Kirby formula. Well, they didn't really throw it out, but they threw the Kirby formula into the Metroid mixer and came out with this huge interconnected map with puzzles and teleporters and stuff. But instead of finding various upgrades for your suit or your equipment that allow you to access other parts of the map, you just have to solve some copyability puzzles. Another thing that I love is the color palette swapping that you would unlock from finding chests in the world. Amazing Mirror is super fun, and it's a shame that HAL never went back to try this type of formula with Kirby ever again. Next is Wario Land 4. Oh boy, Wario Land 4. If you've seen my other videos, you know how I feel about Wario Land 4. If this were my personal list, I would put it in the top 3 easily. I can see some of the shortcomings, though. I don't misunderstand the criticisms. It's very short, and if you're playing on normal mode, it's also very easy. But true men play Wario Land 4 on the very hard difficulty. I miss Wario Land. I wish they'd bring it back. I have to keep this to around 30 seconds, or else I would gush for about another 23 minutes. Just know that I hold this game in high regard, and it's a shame that it only made it this far on the list. Up next is Golden Sun: The Lost Age. And I'll get crucified when I say that I haven't played these games, which is true, I haven't. Rest assured though, when the real Golden Sun shows up on this list, I'll be sure to play through the second half of one complete game, and is pretty much required. An early experiment and episodic releases, playing them back to back is necessary. Well, look forward to a complete review of both of these games when I get around to the original Golden Sun, which, don't worry, it's pretty high up there. Up next at 28, we have Harvest Moon: Friends of Mineral Town. And I can't really get into these types of games, so I don't really know what makes a village life simulator good or bad. But in the words of the fans and of the top 25 lists, they say that Friends of Mineral Town is a contender for the best game in the franchise. So it has got that going for it. If you're a fan of these types of games, you've got both the critics and the fans telling you to check it out. All I know is that Mary is cute. 27 is Mother 3. Really sad. Only making one first place award in the talk amongst yourselves. It's a wonder as to why Nintendo never listened and brought this game overseas. Some say it's copyright problems, others the poor Earthbound sales, the release of the brand new Nintendo DS outshining the Game Boy Advance, but one thing is for sure, it is criminally overshadowed by Mother 2. If Mother 3 had been released in the US, I imagine I'd be seeing it make way more of these top 10 spots. It's actually only mentioned in like 4 of the lists at all. It's truly a shame, because it outshines Earthbound in nearly every aspect. The writing, the characters, the weird rhythm combat that only works sometimes, maybe not that one. Even so, if you're a fan of Earthbound, you owe it to yourself to play this game if you haven't already. Though, I imagine if you're an Earthbound fan, you probably already have. And number 26, last for our video today, we have Astro Boy: The Omega Factor. Now, why exactly is an Astro Boy game this high on the list? I tried it out to see what all the craziness was about, and I guess you just have to be an Astro Boy fan to truly appreciate it. Apparently, it's got a huge cast of Astro Boy characters that I'm sure I'd love to see if I were a fan. There was some customization and upgrading, but for the most part, it just felt like your typical side-scrolling brawler or shooter. So yeah, I guess it is cool that they mixed both beat-em-ups and run-and-gun styles into one game, but I don't quite see the genius in this title. I made it to this giant eyeball sun boss thing, and like, he gets so big, I don't even know how to beat this dude. He covers the whole screen. It's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's definitely nothing special. And that is everything we have today. In the next video, we'll go over games 25 through 11, so there will be 15 titles covered, and then in the video after that, we'll do 10 to 1, and each game will get a little bit more coverage. We had to do it fast this time because there were 26 games to cover, or was it 24? Either way, we had a lot of games to cover, and so I tried to keep them to about 30-45 seconds each, and I'll see you guys next time.